Welcome to Shine the Light, your weekly conversation and investigation of the many issues that are facing our nation these days. Today I want to welcome Charles Heller. He's the Arizona Citizens Defense League. They're ones watching out for our Second Amendment rights and protecting us on that, particularly here in Arizona. I think we're going to start to see as more and more as we've talked, the states starting to take back the power that they need to. And the league is certainly an important part of that. So welcome, Charles. Good to see you here.
It's nice to be invited. Gave me an excuse to come up to Prescott. I'm not sure why I need an excuse, but there are some wonderful gun shops here that I like to frequent. And,
yeah, it's always good to get out of Phoenix. I mean, you know.
Well, it's always good to stay out of Phoenix. Yes. I try not to go there.
There you go.
I'm from Tucson.
Yeah. So. Tell us a little bit about the league and when it started and what it does and so forth.
We started in 2005. Originally it was 6 people, whittled down to 4.
Okay.
And then we started with 4 guys at the Five and Diner on Ray Road in Chandler. Okay. And it's grown to over 18,000 members since then, since 2005. We were incorporated then. We had our first legislative victory in 2006 with the presumption of reasonableness. And what happened was we were able to encourage the legislature to enhance the Castle Doctrine, expand it to the automobile, but what was the jewel, the jewel in the crown there was that we got what was called the presumption of reasonableness in the use of force in self-defense.
Okay.
And that's in law, if people want to look it up, at ARS 13-419.
Okay. And
what it says is, if the reason you use any form of either you threaten or use any form of physical force under 13-404, which is physical defense, 405, which is deadly self-defense, 406, which is defense of another person, 407, which is defense of premises, or 408, which is defense of personal property, or 421, defense of display. If the reason you did it was per one of the defined crimes in statute, you're presumed to have been acting reasonably for purposes of the law if you told law enforcement you're the victim.
Oh, okay. All right.
And so, but it was a monumental thing that happened because between 1996 and 2006, a lot of people got scared, put their hand on something like an ASP baton like I have here, and then were charged with aggravated assault because they'd made what was called a furtive move towards the completion of an act unjustified in law. And we got that canceled, but good.
Yeah, good.
Also, 421, defensive display, said that if someone put you in fear of your life and you put your hand on your firearm or whatever weapon you had in concealment or in your in some form of concealment, such as your pocket, or if you exposed your cover garment or you opened your cover garment and exposed a weapon and said, "Get away from me, I'm armed," or you said, "Back off, I'm armed," that as long as you were the first one to call 9, it doesn't say that in the law, but that's how it works in real life. That you're presumed to be acting reasonably for purposes of the statute.
Wow.
And cops understand 421 really well because they do it all the time when they walk up to somebody on a traffic stop. They got their hand on their firearm. So they get it.
Well, and particularly with law enforcement, because I know that under the CCW thing, you always, if you're ever stopped, you always say to them, "I'm armed, what do I need to do?" So that you don't threaten them in any way, of course.
Practically speaking, you're right, but legally speaking, you're not obligated in Arizona. Arizona is not what we call a positive declaration state, and that was actually one of the contentions in the negotiation for that legislation, which was, will there be a positive declaration? Because many people, especially among the libertarian community, believe that it's a violation of your rights to have to declare that you're armed and of your right to remain silent, your Fifth Amendment right.
Sure.
Even though it's not a crime to be armed, but still many people believe that. And so what we worked was a compromise where you have to tell them upon request. That's what the actual letter of 13-3102, which is the statute. Actually, it's either in 3102 or 3112. I think it's in 3102. That you must declare upon request. Arizona is rather unusual in that. The only other states that I know of you don't have to that are on request are, believe it or not, Illinois and Illinois, and where it's usually most people don't have a permit, although they can now. So Illinois and Arizona, I believe, are the only two
Okay.
non-positive declaration
Yeah.
states.
Well, I know a lot of the trainers up here say it's just a common sense thing to do.
It's a good courtesy.
Yeah, because we want to respect our officers and we
Right.
want to work right away with them and let them know that I'm not a threat to you.
Right. Exactly. One of the things I tell people, because I've been teaching CCW now for 26 years,
Okay.
and that is that you want to make a soft declaration. When the officer walks up to you, you don't say, "I have a gun." You say to him, "Just so you know, I have a permit. There's a firearm in the car. Just so you know."
Sure.
And how about those Cubs?
Yeah.
That's your attitude, and because your attitude will generally be reflected by the officer.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, our son-in-law is a officer, so we understand that perfectly. Yeah. Interesting. Are there a lot of other states that have basically that setup of legislation that you just described in terms of all these?
Colorado does.
Okay.
Texas does. Most states have some form of the presumption of reasonableness. Ohio does not.
Okay.
And they're in the process of changing that. Ohio just got what some people call stand your ground. It's actually no duty to retreat.
Right.
And also along the eastern seaboard, there are states where you don't necessarily have the presumption of reasonableness to your act.
Okay.
Wherever you have a requirement of retreat, you don't always have the presumption of reasonableness to any
Okay.
act, a use of force in the act of self-defense. But if you're going to pin me to which states are which, I haven't studied.
Yeah.
I haven't studied it. I try to. No, I work in the media myself,
Yeah.
and I try very hard to be accurate with my information.
Sure. No. I understand. In terms of like the castle. Well, in my understanding, there's only like 13 or 14 states that actually have a castle law where if
No,
you're in your house.
most of the states in the
do they?
country, most
Oh, okay.
states have some form of castle doctrine.
Okay.
Specifically, New York doesn't.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that New Jersey does not. But
Okay.
still speaking, though, the benefit of the doubt is given to someone who has a felonious entry made against them. They still have a benefit of a doubt, but not necessarily the presumption of reasonableness.
reasonableness, okay.
Whenever you require someone to retreat, the reason that some people on the anti-freedom side say it's a justification of murder law, if you could stand your ground. It's not. What it is if you are in a state where you're required to retreat, what you're telling every criminal who wants to assault somebody is what the good guy's next move is.
Yeah.
And if the good guy by the law has had his next move telegraphed, the bad guy knows where to anticipate the move.
Exactly.
That is morally bankrupt to do that.
Absolutely. So how does the league now here in Arizona, how does it get new members? How does it reach out? In other words, how does it educating us, if you will, in terms of some of the stuff that we need to be letting our voices be heard on?
Well, lately we've been getting our new members by doing media appearances like this one since this COVID pandemic, or panicdemic, as the case may be.
Yeah.
The disease is real. People have died from it.
Sure.
The government response is the problem to it.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to make light of anyone who's lost someone to
No.
it. Okay. But what we do now, and what we've been doing since 2005, is forming legislative relationships. Where we have the trust and confidence of the people in government, even those that don't necessarily like us or side with us. I'll give you an example. Kirsten Sinema.
Okay.
Kirsten Sinema always listened to and liked Dave Kopp, our president and
Right.
chief lobbyist. She would always say to him, "What have you got, Dave?" And she actually voted in 2006 for the enhanced castle doctrine and the presumption of reasonableness.
Yes.
The reason is she's a defense attorney,
Yeah.
and it was in her advantage to do it. Or possibly, maybe she had a good thought. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the point is that we have these legislative relationships. People think that lobbying is done because we give money, and we don't give money to anybody.
Yeah.
Heck, we don't even give. They don't even pay me.
Yeah.
I mean, I drove all the way up here on my own nickel.
But then you get to be in Prescott, so what can I
Well,
say?
it's certainly more than payment to be
Yeah.
in Prescott.
I think we see more and more threat also to people, individuals nowadays. I mean, we've got illegals just flooding the place apparently and getting ready to do that. We've got a mindset out there that's certainly different than we used to see in our nation in terms of that now for a conservative we're a terrorist, all these kind of things. And so how do we best let the people know what's up before the legislature and how they then affect and call their representatives and so forth? How do you guys play a role in that one?
First of all, Hank, I want to be out loud, open, and clear that the Arizona Citizens Defense League does not have any position whatsoever on immigration.
Okay.
And the reason for that is we are basically a right to keep and bear arms organization.
Absolutely.
And we know that we've been very, very successful at because we have stayed in our lane.
Focused.
I am sure that many people who are members have their own opinions about the topic,
Sure.
but we do not engage on immigration and we don't activate on immigration.
Yeah.
We do on right to keep and bear arms, and there's a few other things. Like, for instance, we have gone a little bit outside of our main realm, but still within the realm of protecting your freedom, which is our motto,
Okay.
in terms of limiting the governor's authority or any municipality's authority during an emergency. You see this in Title 26. We were successful in, I think, 2009 in getting the Katrina bill signed so that no firearms could be seized during an emergency, except for the municipalities and government can't touch it unless it's to get it out of the way of a fire, which is an utterly reasonable. Like if you've got a warehouse, like let's say J&G here in Prescott is a huge warehouse, and if there was a fire bearing down on it and they wanted to get all the ammo out of the way,
Sure. It's a public safety issue.
It's a public safety issue, and they could do that. Yeah. But other than that, you cannot in Arizona. And that was one of the reasons why during all of this, the government overreaction to the pandemic, in all the government reactions, Title 26. I think it's 336 or 313. They could not touch gun stores in Arizona, or ammunition businesses. They couldn't touch them.
Yeah, good.
And my classes, there were 20 people in a class right through the whole thing in the basement of Second Amendment sports.
Interesting, yeah. So people probably need to go to your website is probably the best way for them to do that?
AZCDL.org. Excuse me if I talked over you.
No.
AZCDL.org. And we're not, sometimes people get put in CDL and they come up with commercial driver's license. We're the Arizona Citizens Defense League, right. And there's no apostrophe in citizens because it's all of us together.
Right, okay, good.
Without the separation. We don't believe in separated. we don't judge. We don't separate people in any categories.
Sure, that's right. Good.
If you have good intent, you're a friend.
Okay, good. Well, that's what we need to know, because people need to know how can their voices be done. And I think a lot of what's happening nowadays is people are starting to wake up. They're starting to say, how can we make a difference here? I think sometimes we forget, and we're going to talk more about that on the program in the future here, is that we forget that in our system, we the people are the king.
Right.
Everybody else has hired help.
Right.
And we need to let our voices be out there. We've flipped that way too much.
One of the other things that the Arizona Citizens Defense League activates on is, our version of the Second Amendment is Article 2, Section 26, the right to keep and bear arms.
Right.
Which I'll go over in a minute. But what I want to do is I want to stress there's an underlayment beneath that. And it is the stated purpose of government in Arizona, which comes in before before the right to keep and bear arms, which is Article 2, Section 2. And it says it's the stated purpose of why Arizona government exists. And that is that, quote, all power is inherent in the people, and that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed.
Exactly.
And that the purpose of government is to protect the liberties of the individual citizen.
Yeah. That
is more or less verbatim what Article 2, Section 2 says. Now, when people run for office to be the hired help, I ask them either publicly or privately, what is the stated purpose of government? Seeing as how you're going to have to swear to uphold it, what is the stated purpose?
That's right.
Very few people who are running, and I don't care whether they're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Green, Vegetarian, or whatever party they're in.
Yeah.
Very few people have actually been able to say it. I can tell you, Jonathan Rothschild, the man who was mayor for 8 years, I met with him for coffee in Tucson before he was elected, and he knew it.
Really?
He did. Well, he's a lawyer, and he had reason to know it, and I thought that was admirable about the guy. I don't agree with Jonathan Rothschild very much, but Rothschild is an honorable fellow, and he will listen.
Yeah.
He won't act, But he will listen. No,
Yeah,
it's just who
and
he
that's
is.
fine, yeah.
But he actually does understand the stated
What is-
purpose of
yeah,
government,
supposed to be
and
there.
I admire that about
Sure,
the guy.
sure.
There are other legislators, and the only other one I knew it, the only other one that knew the answer was a Green.
Okay.
That she did know it, who ran
Interesting.
for city council. But other than that, most don't. In fact, I'll give you one specifically, Victoria Steele, who I want you to know I've known personally for 25 years.
Right.
And I am very fond of as a human being. Okay? I've asked her that. I've told her. I had her on my radio program. I told her I was going to ask her that.
Okay.
She still can't answer
Still
the
did it.
question.
Really? Well, and you know, we could talk for hours probably on the whole issue of we don't see civic education anymore. I mean, you know, so many of these kids nowadays.
what?
It's another
That's
whole
up to
issue
the
to talk
parents.
about.
Teach your children, like the Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young song says.
Absolutely.
Teach your children well.
Yeah.
And you be the civic educator. My dad taught me what certiorari meant before I ever heard of the infield fly rule.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, and I grew up here in the Prescott area, and it was a whole different. And it was like you say, our parents said, "Here's the basics" and so forth, and so
Right.
we went through all kinds of stuff. You know,
Hank,
so.
did you have to pass a constitution test to get out of grade school?
I'm trying to think if we did. I don't know that we passed a test, but we certainly had a class on it. So I assume there must have been a quiz or something at some point.
We had a 100-question test in the Chicago public schools.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, and I got a 92.
Yeah, good for you.
So
Yeah.
then they thought I cheated. And they made me take it over, and I got a 94.
94, yeah. So it's good. So, good,
Anyway,
okay.
Back to the Citizens Defense League.
Yeah. One of the things, and I know it's more at the federal level, but I think it's indicative of the kind of attack mode we're seeing nowadays, is this HB 127, which was introduced by Sheila Jackson. Don't need to get into that, but I mean,
Yeah, it's basically the British licensing system.
Yeah.
Is what it is. The
Yeah.
the firearm, the FAC, the firearm authorization certificate,
Yeah.
and everything would be under licensure. And what it does is it turns an enumerated right, the right of the individual citizen to bear. Well, that's the Arizona version of it.
Yeah.
It turns the federal, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, completely on its head.
Exactly.
By turning an enumerated right into a privilege. And what the opposition, the anti-freedom people don't understand is that the Second Amendment is on par. I want to say Second Amendment. The right to keep and bear arms is on par with all other rights. It's no lesser
Right.
than the right to peaceably assemble, which got canceled pretty well in the last year, or the right to free speech, which is on the way to being canceled.
Sure.
It's no different. It's on par with those other rights.
Right.
And anyway.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a point that we all need to start to think about here, because we're seeing a fundamental sea change in terms of how our rights are. We
How
understand.
they're being viewed.
Yes, and being pushed to change. We know from the founders that our rights come from God, and the government, as you say, is here to protect those rights.
Right, stated purpose.
Yeah, and then of course that's, like you say, being turned on its head, and
Right.
that's going to be.
There's a reason, you know.
Yeah.
The reason is this movement towards Marxist thought.
Right.
And if you don't have objective standards, if all truth becomes relative,
Sure.
then truth is no longer objective. Right. Truth is relative, and if truth is relative, then any standard can apply.
Any standard goes, yeah.
Right. And if you want to see the logical extension of it, read 1984.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting. I speak to college groups frequently, and I'll say to them nowadays, I understand you guys make up your own truth. And I'll have hands go up. And I'll say, you know, my background is aerospace engineering and business and so forth, and I'm an ordained pastor. But I go back to my engineering. So if you make up your own truth, then what I would like you to do is come up here and stick your finger in this light socket. And they look at me like I'm lost my mind. I said, because it doesn't care what you think about it. And if you don't believe that, we're going on the roof. So this idea that you make up your own truth is not only dangerous to our nation and to individuals, but just, you know, kind of crazy.
Well, I think it's just unfair that we can't just float to the moon. Don't you?
Sure, sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
don't we have a right?
Yes.
Don't we have a right to do that? And I mean, and if more Caucasian people go to the moon than people of color, isn't that racist?
Sure, absolutely.
I'll
Well,
get flagged for that, won't I?
it's interesting. We were having a discussion one day, and this guy was, totally making his own rights thing. I said, "Well, let me give you an example then. Let's supposing I walk up to you with my 9mm and I point at your head and take all your stuff." And you know what his answer was? That wouldn't be right. I said, "Wait a minute. Where'd you get the idea of right? For me, it's right. I want all your stuff."
Right.
So it's somehow we need to get people to come back to see that there are
Well,
principles that we live by that you don't violate.
we need to start with fire is hot, water is wet, and then proceed down the continuum to other truths.
Sure.
But back to it, what the Arizona Citizens
Yes.
Defense League does is we try to very, very hard to get people to stick to the intent of the Constitution, excuse me, of Arizona and of the federal government. We don't get involved in too many things at the federal level.
Right.
We did have an amicus curiae brief in the Supreme Court on both Heller, District of Columbia versus Heller, and McDonald versus City of Chicago.
Sure.
We did have a piece of a brief on each of those.
Good.
But generally speaking, and occasionally we'll put out an alert, like we're going to put out an alert on HR 127,
Right.
the Sheila Jackson Lee bill you were just referring to,
Yeah.
at the end of this legislative session, after we've dealt with Arizona type issues.
Okay. Now, do you guys coordinate with some of the other groups? So, for example, does New Mexico and some of the other states have, in a sense, a defense league like here?
New Mexico does not have a CDL. They do have activist organizations, and yes, we do on the Arizona gun leaders list.
Okay.
Excuse me. We do communicate with them, but how we network with other organizations is to some extent closely held.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's because again, I think that's one of those things where what I want to try and do is let more people be aware of what you guys are doing, that you're here to help and so forth, to educate and so forth. So that's the exciting part.
I'll give you an example of how we network.
Okay.
How we communicate. I had a call last year from Colonel Robert Brown, who's on the NRA board and publisher of Soldier of Fortune magazine.
Yep.
And he says, "Is this Heller?" And I said, "Yes, who's this?" He says, "Is this Robert Brown?" I said, "Colonel Robert Brown?" He said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
I said, "Yes, sir.
Yes,
What can I
sir.
do for you?" And he goes, "Can you come up to Whittington Center? We want to talk to you." "You do? Why is that?" And he goes, "Well, you've got some expertise in forming an organization, and we want to do that in Colorado." So I went up there and I
Absolutely.
helped them with some things they were
Good.
dealing with, and
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting room. He goes, "You sit right here, because I'm deaf as a post, and I need you. If I can't hear them, I need you to tell me what they said." So that's how we communicate.
Yeah, good. Well, and that's good. I think we all need to, there's a strength, if you will, in cooperating with each other as we go forth. So that's exciting. That's neat to see. So good. Okay.
Plus, well, leave it there.
Yeah. Okay. It's also interesting too. Do you guys do anything in terms of what do we want to say? Maybe preemptive kind of education for people. For example, one of the things that I think we'll see, we've already seen it here on the January 6th thing, is a preemptive false flag kind of thing. There's issues here that
refine the question more. What do you mean a preemptive false flag thing?
Well, I
mean,
think
you mean we saw agents provocateur trying to? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I don't have any direct. I know there's at least one Antifa activist who's been arrested and has confessed to the FBI about what he was doing.
Right.
And he was there with a reporter who had actually paid them money to go into. I know that's a matter of published fact. It's not a rumor or a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But other than that, I don't have too much information on who exactly did that riot.
Right.
It wasn't an insurrection.
Yeah.
Because in an insurrection, people don't pose for selfies.
No.
Right. But it was a riot. Let's
Yeah.
be honest. It was a riot, and there may very well have been some Trump supporters who got too enthusiastic and participated in
Sure.
it. And I'm sure that will come out in the wash.
Yeah.
Eventually, it will, as to who and what did it. But as far as we're concerned, first of all, We don't do I want to be very clear about this. Arizona Citizens Defense League does not do rallies. We sometimes will participate in an event with other
Sure.
people by having a table, and we pay for that.
Okay.
But we do not, and we'll sometimes speak if we're invited to do
Right.
at a rally, as you
Good.
saw last Saturday.
Last Saturday,
Certainly, right.
yeah.
But we don't organize rallies. We don't organize protests.
Okay.
We don't. We are not that kind of an organization.
Okay.
You won't see any of our guys wearing a Che Guevara T-shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. But what we're, this is what our logo looks like, and this
Sure.
is the kind of stuff we show up in.
Okay.
And our main focus is on legislative efforts so that we maintain our freedom.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is restore the complete right to keep and bear arms to the fullest extent possible.
Right. Yeah.
So
Good. Okay.
that's our mission.
Yeah, well, and that's important because, we have other groups doing other things. For example, like you say, Saturday, the rally down at the Capitol was great. It's put on by the rioters. And, and you guys were there to participate in that, certainly, as we go forth. I think what we're going to see, I think it was Victor Hansen who recently pointed out, he says the January 6th event was very much of a Hitler Reichstag event. And you remember how he did that. He attacked the Parliament building, blamed it on the communists, and they used that as the false flag in order to gain control. And people hopefully have some perspective of what we're up against nowadays, so that we may see that kind of thing and we don't get taken in by it, But
Well,
like you say,
the Arizona Citizens Defense League officially has no position on that.
Right.
We're not it's outside of our bailiwick.
Yes.
And we want to keep it that way because we're I won't say laser focused, but we're intently focused. We're spotlight focused
Sure.
on the right to keep and bear arms issues, and it's important that we do that and let other organizations, which are equally good in their own venues,
exactly.
express those other things
Yes.
that may need to be
Well,
said.
but the real, a lot of the power, though, comes from what you all are doing in terms of people understand the foundation of their Second Amendment right, so that when they see some of these other things, they say, well, wait a minute now, I have a basic right here,
Right.
period.
And deeper than Second Amendment, the other thing we do is the stated purpose of government. The federal government has a stated purpose of
Yes.
government, in order to provide for the domestic tranquility, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense,
Right.
and so on and so forth. It has a stated purpose of government too. And when people are aware of the stated purpose of government, it's much easier to hold the hired help to their oath.
Exactly.
It's not easy, but it's easier.
Easier, yeah, that's good. So good. Excellent. Okay, well, I'm pleased that you're here today, and I want to get you back. I want to talk about some more of the specifics now that we've got in Arizona, but I appreciate you being here today. And anything else that we need to know about?
Well, I want to remind people that they don't have to be an Arizonan to be a member of the Arizona Citizens Defense
okay.
League. We have a couple members in England. We have people north of the border in Kanakistan.
Okay.
We have members from all over the world because they understand the fundamental importance of the right to keep and bear arms as part of the pantheon of their rights.
Yeah.
All right. It's another brick in the wall of freedom.
Interesting.
And so and we have members from all over. You don't have to be a firearms owner or any of that. All you have to do is say in writing that you don't advocate for the use of force or violence against government, and you can be a member of our organization at azcdl.org.
Okay.
azcdl.org.
It's interesting you mentioned that because we do mission work in Africa and so forth, and it's interesting to watch how they'll look to our country and to organizations like yours to say, how do we get these rights? Because we're so unique here. We take this for granted as Americans, I think, a lot of times. We just kind of grew up with it, and it's just part of us, and we don't think about the fact that so many people don't have the basic rights and don't have the mindset that we have these rights from God and that the government's here to protect those rights.
Right.
So that's interesting to see.
We were the first country that was formed on those principles.
Right.
The idea that the people were sovereign and they elect the representative to do the things that they couldn't easily do for themselves, like have a navy.
Right.
I mean, I'd love to have a navy, but it's just me, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Your rowboat isn't going to do it. Huh?
Well, no, I mean, I could probably mount a 50 on it, but it's just not enough.
Yeah.
You know, in this day, in the electronic day and age.
Yeah.
I'm a naval history buff, that's why I make the
Yes.
analogy, so.
Well, and you're right. I mean, I think again, a lot of times we don't appreciate what we have here. You know,
We don't.
We're you know.
We don't. And when you go to places, like if you ever go to D.C. and you go to the Korean War Monument,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been there,
Yes.
and you see, especially if you go on a foggy day and the fog blows through those soldiers, those statues of the soldiers, I mean, when you see that,
Yeah.
you say, they did something.
Yes.
You know, and you look at the Vietnam Wall and you see all the names on the wall. You realize what people, and you go to the World War II monument, which has names of all the major campaigns around the monument.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you go to those places and you realize they did all that for us.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, and they were, what they fought for was really a principle.
Right.
And those are the principles we try to enforce. We try to encourage the legislature to act on them. That's what the Arizona Citizens Defense League is for.
Yeah, I think a lot of times people forget, we all forget sometimes that those people died for us and they never knew us.
Right.
But like you say, they died for the principle of that, for the freedom that we have.
Right.
And we leave a legacy. I think sometimes we forget,
We do.
you know, every day we leave a legacy behind, plus our lives.
And
So,
if you want a modern lesson of that, look at the recent passing of Rush Limbaugh.
yeah.
You know, you talk about a legacy. That program continues on
Absolutely.
with substitute hosts and his voice.
His voice.
And the principles are still staying. I think it's going to stay right on the air.
Yeah.
And and the principle is what drives it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the opposition is driven by the principle of Marxism.
That's right. Yes. And unfortunately, they've been marching through the institutions, as he said,
Yeah, it's
100
true.
years ago. So good. All right, well, Charles, I appreciate you being here, and we'll get you back, and we'll.
My pleasure, Hank.
Yeah, we'll talk some more.
All right.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us all today, and make sure you tune in next time, and we'll continue this discussion and many other issues as well. Thank you so much.